Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Hopefully not melted entirely. It's such an incredible privilege to be on this stage and to be here in person at ChangeNOW. Last year, I had the opportunity to participate in ChangeNOW virtually, but it wasn't nearly this hot. And also, we didn't have the opportunity to interact with all these incredible people that are here in the audience, across the conference, and also the people who will join me here on stage today. Hopefully, you've been able to join a lot of sessions earlier today, and thank you so much for making it through to this, one of the last sessions of the day today, which afterwards will be followed by some drinks and some socializing in the B Corp village in the corner over there, so please do join us. But if you've been tuning into some of the sessions earlier today, you've heard some key themes. Whether that's about, the day started today talking about the need for holistic sustainability and redefining what it is we mean by sustainability. We've talked about the need to scale solutions. We've talked about the importance of measurement and how measurement matters. Not just what you're measuring, but how you're measuring it, and ensuring that we're redefining what progress and success looks like. And we've also talked about the need of more systemic thinking. And all of those are themes that we'll touch on today. And thankfully, the sun is moving away, I think, hopefully for a long time. So today, a little bit of what we're talking about is going to build on a lot of those themes. So we're not here to talk about how one individual company can transform the way that they do business, but the ripple effect that companies can have on each other, and not just companies themselves, but also employees within organizations, and how we all need to collaborate together to accelerate that change. So to have this discussion, I'm really thrilled to bring a really diverse group of panelists here on stage with me today. And some of those are small businesses, some of those are multinationals. I realize I haven't introduced myself. So before I introduce the panelists, I'm Correa. I'm head of marketing and communications at B Lab Europe. And B Lab is the global nonprofit organization working to transform the current economic system to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. So just because we're here in person and we have the opportunity to do so, I'll ask you to pause from fanning for 1 second to how many of you have heard about the B Corp movement in here? Raise your hands. Great, awesome. How many of you are B Corps? Awesome, great. Great to hear that. Hopefully that number increases, and the interest in the B Corp movement also increases as a part of this conversation. So the panelists you'll hear today are a range of organizations, a range of people from different organizations, from small companies to multinationals to people who have been a part of our movement for a while, to those who are starting their impact journeys and are on the process along the way, and also the standards perspective, which are ultimately the backbone of our movement. So with that, I'll invite our panelists to come on stage. Please join us. Welcome, welcome. Amazing. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the stage today. Rather than me trying to introduce each of these incredible human beings, I'm actually going to pass it on to each of them to give a brief intro about themselves. So starting with Caroline Renoux.
Hi, everyone. I am Caroline Renoux, founder and CEO of Birdeo. Birdeo, which is a company specialized in recruitment, in sustainability, and positive impact. And we've just achieved our 3rd recertification in B Corp.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stéphane Toutin. I'm the country manager of Urb-It. We are a company operating in the last mile delivery, pan-Europeanly. We are working in UK and France. We just started in Spain. And we are looking forward to decarbonize the last mile operation in Europe. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Celine, Barral. So I've been working in the agro industry for 24 years now, 22 years at Danone. And for the past 6 months for Bonduelle, which is a company, international company, but family group, who is selling vegetable in a different country.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Osusky, and I am the head of standards and insights at B Lab Global. So I'm here from Philadelphia, over enjoying a hot day in Paris, and we'll be here for a few days. And basically, in my role on the standards team, what we do is really help define what it means to be a good business. And so how that converts into what the certification standards are for B Corps, as well as how we help businesses improve their performance on those standards.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dan, for the long journey to join us here in the sun. So before we get into the panel discussion, I'd just love to pass it back to Dan to share a little bit more about the context of our bigger vision here, and why the B Corp movement was founded, why it was created, and the role of standards, the constantly evolving standards, to continue to push businesses of all sizes across sectors to improve their own impact.
Yeah, thank you. I'm tempted to try to turn that question back to the rest of the panelists and the audience, because they're all B Corps, and you all should have a pretty good familiarity with this, but I'll try to provide some context setting. B Lab, as a nonprofit organization, started about 15 years ago with a vision from a few of our co-founders who were themselves entrepreneurs and business leaders, recognizing that there were some deep infrastructure challenges for those entrepreneurs and business leaders who were really trying to do business in a different way. And one of the big things that they identified, although there were a number, was really a challenge in distinguishing between what could be considered good marketing and an actual good company. This is fundamentally about a question of greenwashing. There's a lot of ability for companies to be able to talk about things that they perceive to be good and are trying to take advantage of that. But ultimately, there's a real difficulty for businesses themselves, consumers, and others to understand what's underlying those claims and what can be actual meaningful impact for these businesses. And so that's the purpose of our standards. From the beginning, we created a certification to really identify what are high-impact, high-performance practices that all businesses can be having. That does not mean that a company is a perfect business if they're a B Corp, but it does mean that they are committed to a higher level of performance and accountability. The root of those standards is a tool that we've developed called the B Impact Assessment. For those of you who are B Corps, you're probably intimately familiar with it and probably have experienced some of the challenges and difficulties with it as well, which is, in a lot of ways, quite intentional. It's hundreds of indicators and questions that a company is required to go through that's comprehensive in scope. And so it talks about a company's governance practices, their impact on workers, their communities, the environment, and their customers, to collectively paint a picture of whether this company is holistically performing well. One of the really powerful things that we've seen as different types of companies have actually engaged with the tool is it's quite frequent that a company comes in with a particular area of focus and strength in how they've always identified what they're trying to do with their impact. But when they go through this comprehensive assessment, I would venture to say every single company is able to learn something new about their performance and a different practice that they can adopt. And so a certain company might come in with a real focus and interest on environmental issues and addressing climate. But when they actually go through our assessment and explore our standards, they'll start to actually think about new areas like inclusion and how they can create a more diverse and inclusive workplace. Or they could think about where there are ways to actually engage their community in different ways. And so there's always this value in the comprehensive standard that's developed and how different businesses can recognize both the strengths that they have as well as where there are areas and opportunities for continuous improvement.
Thank you so much, Dan. And I think that's such an important part of this. It's a continuous journey, and I think we'll probably touch on all of that throughout the panel discussion of how you learn and improve, not just from looking at your own impact, but also from the community itself. So with that, when we talk about the community, we often talk about the companies and the number of companies. And we've just hit an amazing milestone. There's now 5,000 B Corps around the world globally, which is awesome. Thanks for the little class. But as that number grows, so does the urgency to address these challenges. And when you look at those numbers as the employees that are a part of those organizations, that number multiplies quite quickly. So there's over 400,000 employees that work at B Corps around the world. So my first question for the panel discussion, we'll first go to Caroline, but please everybody else jump in, is what's the role of employees in transforming organizations from within?
A good question. So I must say, so for Birdeo, we are what we call a purpose company because, you know, the core of our business is sustainability, and we are a small company because we are only 15 employees. So I thought, it just makes sense for us to be B Corp, and it's going to be easy. Now, I must say, I didn't realize that the journey would be much more than I expected, which is a good thing. Huh?
You're welcome.
Because in fact, we thought we do everything good, but there is this 360 tower that we do, and then I realized that there are much more things that we can improve. So that's one of the very positive aspects. And it, as well, in terms of competitive advantage, if we compare with our competitors who are the same size as we, so it helped us to have really a CSR policy, which we can demonstrate for our customer and for our employees. And I realize how much for them this is powerful to be B Corp and to certify and recertify, because it's the third time, and each time you need to be better. So you have to involve all the company within this journey. Now, in terms of how to engage all the communities, I think we can do much more, because in each company you have a few people who are involved, and it's great. But I think every B Corp employee should be able to be a sponsor of it and to be proud of it.
If I may, this is very true. It's a very powerful, engaging tool. And I think it's something that could be missed in case companies take it as a race toward points. So this is probably a trap. I think every single company who went through that process can say that. I think if you miss this opportunity to transform every single job in the company, you missed the dynamic of what is behind the standard, because this standard is offering a complete screening of what we're doing every day in each corner of the company, so everyone can feel really concerned by this. So we try to deliver this mindset across our entities, as well to make people feel that this is much more than a race toward points, but it's really something they will wake up for every morning.
Something also I think is extremely important is we cannot be perfect on going to the standard of B Corp. What is great is taking this as a compass. It gives you the direction of what can we do that is good to all our stakeholders, and talking about employees, talking about our customers or shareholders or communities. It's about the direction that you take, and having this in mind in each decision that you make is probably one of the best ways to grow your business.
One of the things we joke about at B Lab sometimes is kind of posing a question of who would be more likely to answer our assessment accurately, a CEO or an intern of a company. And our hypothesis is, for the most part, an intern or an employee would actually do a better job at answering the assessment. And part of that is because one of the real opportunities is, I think, employees and engaging employees in these types of processes is actually an accountability mechanism frequently. They can see and understand the business in a different way, and also really think about what can be expected and what they'd like to see in their business. That can actually really help make sure that any of the practices that are being adopted or being used or evaluated in the assessment isn't just a check-the-box exercise, but is actually showing up and being lived and experienced in the company.
I want to touch on a point that you mentioned, Caroline, of as a company with 15 employees, you thought that becoming a B Corp would be easy. Now, imagine for a multinational.
It was very pretentious. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if even for you it wasn't easy, imagine for a multinational. And the B Corp movement is largely founded on small enterprises, purpose-driven organizations that from the beginning of the movement 15 years ago were really leading the way and really pioneering how we define impact and how we define the role of business at large in the world, and inspiring other businesses to rethink that. And now a lot of larger organizations are paying attention to that and also transforming their own ways. But I'd love to ask a question to Celine, what it's like for a multinational to go through this process, and what is that dynamic? How do pioneering organizations and larger organizations complement each other when it comes to accelerating impact and creating systemic change?
That's a challenge, indeed, because going through a certification as a single entity is something. Doing that for dozens of entities to get your global certification is definitely another story. So it deserves a specific process, a specific animation as well, at large scale. But what we love in that journey is that exchanging with our peers of different size is very enriching for you and for us. Because I think small sizes entities are here to be even bolder in the way they approach it, to raise ambition that go probably further than the one a big company can have. They show the way, in a way. They set a high standard. And big companies are probably more able to scale it up. So I think it's a very interesting balance, and we see that in the different networking and discussion we have with companies of very different sizes. So for Bonduelle in particular, it means that in terms of organization, we have created waves, like wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. It enables us to grow up in terms of experience, to go faster, to really improve the way we approach the certification throughout the time. So this is a learning journey, even at higher scale for an entity of a large size.
Yeah, it's a learning experience, but one that, you know, if we stand a chance to tackling the systemic issues, you know, we need all companies to embrace that. So thank you so much for going on that journey. And I think with that, I mean, the role of it, yeah, do you want
I had a question regarding to the multinationals. How do you make it successful, the journey for so big companies to get the adherence for all stakeholders within the organization?
So this is definitely a challenge because it lasts a long time. I mean, we need to maintain we need to be very resilient in the way we approach it and to keep the mindset up during like 5 years, maybe more sometime. So that's why we need to split a little bit to save the energy of people and to think the process as a ramp up. So you don't mobilize everyone at the same time during a long period of time. So we need to size it, to frame it. So we are organizing successive kickoff, like to make every entity start at a different time. And at the end, the engine is working and the dynamic is here. But it demands some discipline and the type of specific animation to keep it up all the way around.
Building on that, I want to ask a question because it's one thing to talk about, you know, pursuing certification, but another to talk about the impact that you're already creating within your organization. So are there any examples that you'd like to share of ways Bonduelle is in parallel to pursuing the journey to certification, also, you know, looking at some of your own practices and finding new solutions as well? Putting you on the spot.
Well, we're really on our way. Huh? We don't have any entity certified yet, so I would not, we are still waiting for the first certification to come at the end of the year. I think what is important is to animate the whole process, not only having the certification target in mind. So we are animating our team around 3 dimensions. Of course, the points. We need to have points, to win points, and to be very disciplined in the way we assess ourselves. But we have a very big amount of energy dedicated to engage our people, make B Corp understood inside the company. It looks obvious, but it's not when we have 14,000 people to educate or to train on this certification and to put them in mind the right mindset, that it's not an audit process, it's much more. So we spend a lot of energy in the team, in the central team, to deliver that and to engage people through training, benchmarking, talking with the network. So this is a quite significant amount of time that we spend. And the third element that is often forgotten when we start the certification is what will I do with that after? How will I communicate? How do I use my network? How do I leverage my friends in a country in a B2B, in a B2C way? But it's often forgotten at the beginning because we often put a lot of energy in getting the certification and we forgot the why we're doing that. So we try to bring it back to what do we want to achieve as an entity, as a company? It's not the 80 point, right? It's something very different. So we try to, all the way to animate those 3 pillars, certification, engagement, and like voicing, communicating, spreading the word in a way.
Yeah, and hopefully...
Yes, for us, because we are much more smaller and we are a service company, but it reminds all the team that we have high standard of what we want to achieve, and that the most important is not only the turnover we're getting at the end of the day, but really the customers and how we deal with them. And it's true that we have sometimes conversation within the team where, should we really accept this client, and it happens sometimes that we decide not to work for some customers because they don't respect the high standard we want to have, because for every jobs we work on, we want them to have a positive impact.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's a lot here that really resonates with me. I think sometimes there's a trap of thinking that the certification is the end of the journey, and that you've achieved it and you're there. And I think in the spirit of all that you're sharing, and I think what we experience on our side is actually, it's in some ways maybe like halfway up the mountain. And actually the real obligation begins once you're a certified B Corporation. And then there's a new set of expectations for your company to really maintain that over time. And that's true both with some of the aspects of our certification process, but also, I think more importantly, the spirit of what this all means and what we're collectively trying to achieve.
That's a very good point. And we have been certified in 2020, so almost 2 years already. And we don't use the certification as itself. This is how we can grow, how we can build a culture around it. The foundation of Urb-It was doing business and doing good. So using B Corp is some kind of framework for us to make sure that, are we doing good or not? Do we miss something? What is the next step? What can we do next year? And how we can move forward and being better and better every year. So again, we cannot be perfect, we can just be better. And this is what we are trying to achieve. And this is how the evaluation helps us to move forward.
I think what we try to do every day with the team is each time we are asked, if I do this project, how many points will I get? That's the wrong question. If you do this project, are you doing a better job? And that's twisting totally the way people approach the certification and the tick the box exercise, which is by definition wrong.
And I think that point about, this shouldn't be a conversation about certification, but a conversation about impact, right? And how do we kind of maximize and accelerate impact? And I think within the B Corp community and also, with purpose-driven organizations at large, you see a lot of, especially in the startup scene, a lot of businesses that were, founded to solve a problem or founded, with impact really at the core of that. And it's really important that that then inspires other companies to kind of take those solutions on or, scale that up. So I'd love to pass the next question to Stéphane because, within certification, we also talk about impact business models. Currently, it's not a requirement for certification, but it is something that we also see once businesses certify. There's also a likelihood that ahead of their next certification, they'll adopt a new business model, whether that's from inspiration of other companies or looking at, where they can improve. So Stéphane, I'd love to ask the next question to you. As working at a really innovative B Corp, how do you work with how do you collaborate with other organizations, both within the community and also large enterprises, to scale up some of the solutions you've provided?
So first of all, you mentioned about having an impact or running a business. B Corp for us is doing both. It's not being either performing or having an impact, it's doing both. Long range, if you just have an impact, it's extremely difficult to maintain. Just making business is what we're experiencing since a lot of years now. So doing both is probably one of the directions to take. As you can imagine, it's always a bit of a challenge for big companies, as you mentioned, to change the direction and the way they operate. Agility is something that is extremely challenging. So the collaboration between corporates and startups is probably for the getting the opportunities to see what's the innovation in the market, getting some insights on the early experiments that have been taken. And on the other end, for startups, obviously there is some items about financing, but this is not only the situation or the most important even. It's getting access to the market, their customers, and the business that we're operating is based on partnerships. So we are delivering packages in big cities. So the key for us is to support those corporates to do better, I would say. So for that, we are running experiments. We are delivering on e-cargo bikes. We are using our couriers and fleet to be, let's say, a bit better for the environment. So when we have a day like today, we all understand and agree that there is something to change. The thing is, when we look at those big boats, they cannot make this change like this. It takes some time, and we are there to support and help them and looking new direction and experiment. So we are working already and collaborating with those companies, trying to go for them in the right direction. So reducing the emission of carbon or the congestion in the cities. And we are trying again to do it in the right way and making fair wages or working conditions to our employees. And that's something that we are putting a lot of energy to make it successful.
Maybe on the field of impact, I forgot to mention for a multinational company, that's a tricky one, because it's very rare that it's hard to find an impact business model that will work for every single country, every single business. So even if we are a big company, we need to deep dive and to go really close to the issue and see what resonates locally. So it will be a sum of impact that may be of different nature. If I speak about the US, our US entity, they have chosen to work on open hiring, which may not be a good option for Germany or Italy. So it deserves some customization, even in a global process, and even in this domain of impact.
And I love that example on open hiring, because it's something that was created and ideated by one of the founding B Corps, Greystone Bakery. And it's amazing to see other organizations of different sizes and scales trying that model out. And I think that's the beauty of the community as well. I don't know if any of you have any other examples of influences from one B Corp to another, or one B Corp to within their industry that you'd like to share. I don't know, putting you all in the literal hot seat.
Well, it's not so much that I have precise example, but I know that each time we interact within the community, it gives a lot of energy, but not only to me, but as well to the team, and it gives energy because we have a lot of B Corp customers as well, and I think exchanging together makes us remind that our purpose is to make business, but to make business in a good manner. And of course, when you are on a daily basis interacting with many other different customers, you can tend to forget it. And the community really helps us to remain focused.
Maybe an example I can talk about also quickly is we are a business requiring some resources, and we are trying to partner with some authorities, local authorities, some city hall, these kind of authorities, to focus and to improve and to elaborate on hiring local people. So that helps to create some jobs, but also create the awareness around the solution in the local cities that we are operating. And that's a win-win situation if you think about the overall picture, bringing some works to the actual people and delivering a better city with less trucks on the road for deliveries.
And I think to come back to the open hiring and Greystone Bakery that you were mentioning before, I think in the US for us, it has been very inspiring to look at all those entities who have put this at the core of their business, which is not the case for Bonduelle, But looking at it closely, we realized that in the context of great resignation, all what we know, the war of talent, it made a lot of sense for us to engage further in that journey. So the team took it very seriously, and they are actually implementing that at a large scale in our 3 factories. So that's, for us, a very super interesting achievement.
And coming back to the initial question about startups and corporates, and this is what is important in the end, is about scaling. And as soon as you have the opportunity to test a process or a product, and once you have the right partnership with the right corporate, in this case, you can really scale. And what you did at the beginning for good, you can do in a bigger scale and get a bigger impact toward the communities again.
I think the few examples that I think of are a little bit more at the aggregate level, in that what we've seen is not just is there this individual peer-to-peer learning opportunity around best practices, but there's also a lot of real energy among the B Corp community to sort of get together at scale and think about where there are ways to actually work together. The few examples that jump to mind for me are there's been a massive global sort of gathering and connection around climate action collectively within the B Corp community, really acknowledging that even where our standards currently sit, there is more action that needs to be taken from B Corps to really lead. And there's been these climate collectives that have gathered together to not only try to lift the ambition of the action that the companies are taking, to really kind of challenge one another and say, let's up that commitment, but then also to share the details of how they can actually do that together. There's other examples on the industry level that others can probably speak of with more detail, like the B Corp Beauty Coalition doing things specifically in that space. And then perhaps most importantly, even more broadly, is the collective advocacy work that the B Corp movement does around actual governance practices and what is expected of the purpose of companies and how that can be rewritten in law. One of the things that we've been doing on the standard side for really the last few years is we've been listening to the community and thinking about how the structure of our standards could and potentially need to evolve for new forms of leadership and what leadership looks like moving forward. And actually, one of the big things that we've heard through a lot of listening tours and focus groups and stakeholder engagement is that leadership requires looking beyond your own walls. It requires that a company actually think about how they're sharing or how they're engaging in collective action with others. And so that's something that we're thinking about, how we actually further incorporate that into the core standards themselves.
And I think that's a great segue to one of the last topics that I really want to touch on, but I think that we could have a really rich discussion on, is both Dan and Stéphane, you mentioned this idea that certification doesn't mean a company's perfect. And Dan, even now, kind of talking about the Climate Collective and the standards and the work being done around and performance requirements, everybody's kind of learning continually along the way. So while companies are on this journey of improvement, how do we hold them accountable? And what are systems in place to ensure an initiative isn't just a one-off kind of impactful thing that might look good in the press, but that the company is truly committed to making an impact? What are some ways that we do that? Maybe starting with Dan. Yeah,
I'll start. So when I began sharing sort of the beginning of B Lab, and one of the key problems that was identified was this need to differentiate between good marketing and actual good companies. There was another core problem that was identified from the outset, which was as much as businesses really want to do this work and really think about how they can improve and address social and environmental issues, there are some fundamental legal barriers for them to actually accomplish that in a really systemic, meaningful way over time. And what this is ultimately about is sort of the elephant in the room, which is shareholder primacy. That degree of shareholder primacy, which says a company is required in their decision-making to ultimately extract as much profit as they can for the value of their shareholders, is something that is really a root cause of a lot of the fundamental challenges that businesses in our world has been facing. That idea of shareholder primacy varies to some degree in different markets, and so you can kind of think about what that might look like in the United States versus France versus elsewhere, but it is actually quite pervasive. And so one of the big things that B Lab has been doing to help solve that is actually create an alternative to what shareholder primacy looks like. And that's a different governance structure that creates expectations for companies to consider all stakeholders in their decision-making and not just shareholders. In the United States, this has historically taken the form of a corporate entity called a benefit corporation, but it looks and exists somewhat differently in a variety of different markets around the world, including here in France. Pardon my awful French pronunciation, but it's an enterprise à mission. Is that right? Yeah. Thank you.
Entreprise à mission.
I won't say it anymore. I'll just like sort of lean it over. Yeah. And so ultimately what this is doing is creating an underlying accountability mechanism for companies to not just have high performance in a moment when we're assessing them and when they're doing individual practices, but it's actually establishing an expectation that this is something that's in the root of the company's decision making forever, in all time. And in Europe in particular, there's a lot of really exciting efforts to actually think about how this is not just something that companies can opt into, but ultimately whether this should be the form of business collectively moving forward. I would also add that I think there's just this really powerful special combination between this idea of standards and what performance looks like and what accountability is at the underlying root. And those are both actually quite necessary for one another. One of the ways that I actually think about this is for a traditional business, they might have the purpose of maximizing profit. If you're ever looking to invest in a company, and if they say, well, my purpose is to maximize profit, you wouldn't just say, oh, great, here's $1,000, here's my investment, here's my check. You actually want to know if they're achieving it. And we know that plenty of businesses, even with the purpose of making money, don't necessarily do a good job of it. The same, unfortunately, could be true on the impact side. There could be a purpose to achieve social and environmental performance. But really what's also necessary in conjunction with that is the ability to assess that performance and have standards to really hold them accountable. So the combination of underlying governance structures and defining what that actually looks like really creates the special sauce of what it means to be a B Corp and what we're collectively trying to achieve.
Danny, if you want to jump in with how has accountability and transparency manifested for you within your B Corp journey? And for Birdeo, you've now recertified 3 times. So how has that manifested within your organization of how you demonstrate progress throughout?
So we have, in fact, we have 2 B leaders, we could call them. So they are really in charge of carrying the process. We have another person because we are société à mission as well, because I think the combination of the both is very interesting. So we have 3 people within the team really engaged with that, and well, the progress is being announced maybe every month. And each time we have a team meeting, which is about on a quarterly basis, I think half of it is really based on the progress we do and what is our impact and how we can improve as well.
Maybe on that concept of transparency and stakeholder dialogue that you were mentioning, Dan, I think what is interesting today is that B Corp pioneered kind of this approach, but we see more and more dynamic going into the same direction. I mean, like, even from a regulatory standpoint, transparency will be tomorrow the norm. So B Corp is helping us as well to go faster and probably to be more ready to face this new regulatory challenge and the way we will report in the future, all of this, even if the standards still requires alignment and all of this, but I think it gives company a kind of lead ahead on this transparency and stakeholder dialogue dimension.
Because, the funny thing, this is almost that large company like Bonduelle are more transparent than, smaller company because we have no regulation. So going through this process, it forces us, and it's not bad, but to be more transparent, not because we don't want, just because nobody asks.
And that brings me a question. So we are talking B Corp certification for companies. So where do we stand when it comes to authorities, governments? Are we planning something like B Corp for governance?
I'm trying to think of all the different things that we hear. B Corp for governance, B Corp for nonprofits, B Corp for people. I would encourage anyone who's interested in that to go create it. We've got our hands full on the business side.
But I think that's a really interesting point, and I think it brings us back to the theme of the session itself, which is this impact ripple effect. And when we talk about what the B Corp movement is trying to achieve, of course we're focused on businesses and transforming the business sector, because we believe that businesses have a really unique opportunity to accelerate that change with urgency and with scale. But all of the work that we do, both as B Lab and as the B Corp community, is influencing behavioral change across their customers, within their communities, within their organizations, and then also cultural changes at large, and then ultimately, as Dan mentioned as well, structural changes, so working towards changing legislation and policies. So even if there isn't a B Corp for governments or B Corp for NGOs, I think hopefully our movement is working towards impacting those sectors as well. But I think as we talk about this, and there's growing influences, whether that's coming from employees or whether that's coming from other businesses, you could also call those influences pressures, right? So there's also a pressure to accelerate impact. And some companies are in the beginning of that journey, others have been doing it for years. What are some challenges? This is an open question to any of the panelists, but what are some challenges for some organizations that are now looking at like, hey, I need to transform the way that I do business, but I don't know how, and if I start talking about it right now, I'm going to get crucified because I might not be as far along in the journey as I'd hoped to be. So what are some challenges or advice that any of you might have for companies that are in the early stages but really understand the need to improve their impact?
Probably my first advice would be one step at a time. You cannot change an organization from one day to the other, from black to white. That doesn't work. The only option you have is continuous improvement, having a clear direction, and communication. If you share about your vision and how you want to accomplish things, bringing people on board, bringing the culture, that's probably the best advice I would share.
I think, yeah, another one that could work, and it works for a person and it works for a company as well, is just accept your vulnerability. You may be vulnerable in some areas, but it's good to know. And when you know where you're vulnerable, then you're probably better equipped to face it and to act upon it. So, and that's true for a person, and that's true for an entity as well. So I think there is a posture of being ready to receive the reality of what you're operating. It's a mindset of progress, so just dare to know the truth. It's okay.
I would say if you're a company and that you want to start, maybe it would be to train all the workers, on the impact their business has on the environment and socially speaking as well. Because too often there are companies, they think they are doing well, but in fact there are so many things that they don't see, or sometimes they do things well, but they don't know in. And first, if everybody within the company is aware of what is the impact and what are the SDGs, and what is my impact on biodiversity, on carbon, it's a first step.
I think all these answers really resonate with me, and one thought that I have is, I think some of these challenges actually exist not just for those organizations who are just getting started. One of the things that we actually hear is even those companies who are quite in fact leaders and are really high performing sometimes feel like there might even be a higher target on their back around where there are potential flaws in their own performance. And that creates a real risk and a potential disincentive for leaders to continue to lead, which is kind of scary. What I see, and I think this is building off of your comment around vulnerability, in terms of some of the things that when I look at companies and really admire most, is the humility and the willingness to share where there are imperfections. I think there are some organizations who are able to go out there in a very simple way and acknowledge where there is the need for more improvement. My hope is that helps alleviate the pressure from others because it's sort of very forthcoming and sharing that with the world in a way that isn't bringing that pressure back on them, and ultimately creates an understanding for all the other businesses who want to follow in their footsteps that they also don't need to be perfect yet. And maybe there's the need and the opportunity for those different actors, both within the business community as well as other stakeholders and ecosystem players, to get together and think about where there are collective solutions that can be driven.
Partnering is something important. I mean, if you're not the solution to a problem that you have identified, just partner. Find the right entity. Could be a startup, could be another company, can go through acquisition or just partnering, and you can make big steps with this.
Yeah, collaboration is definitely key in that. I think both collaboration and transparency, to your point, Dan. And I think, hopefully that's what we continue to see as this movement grows, not just within the community itself, but also how members of the community engage with other business leaders and inspire all businesses to operate in a way that benefits all people, community, and the planet. So with that, we're wrapping up our panel. Thank you all for withstanding this heat, especially to the panelists for being on stage and sharing all of your perspectives. And for everybody, I know it's the end of the day, but we're also really excited to continue this conversation on a more kind of one-on-one basis in the B Corp village just there at the corner. There maybe or maybe not be some drinks. I don't know. I might be saying something that's not true. But please do come join us. We're fun anyways.
It took me a second to realize, I was wondering why no one was sitting in the center, and I realized, oh, that's where the sun is. And so I understand why everyone's over on that side now. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, I hope you continue to have an incredible conference. And when we're talking about the impact ripple effect, that all of the B Corps that are sharing their solutions within ChangeNOW space, and also all of the incredible speakers on stage, that they continue to inspire every organization to improve, because there's always room for improvement. But thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.